webinar 524 Cyprus issue. We're going to cover week 6, what really happened in 1974. I would like to talk about 2 events here. The first one is that took place in July 15th in 1974. But let me start to talk about the details. A coup d'etat took place in Athens in November 1967, and it was General Dimitrios Ioannidis who was the leader of the junta. This was a military takeover, so it was a military government. He thought Makarios should be removed from office because of leftist support to him in Cyprus and his visits to communist capitals in the world. Makarios suspected that a coup would take place in Cyprus through his intelligence agency, and EOKA B was banned, but its operations continued underground. So everything started in the summer of 1974, on July 15th, when the Greek officers in Cyprus, through EOKA B, who was Grivas's militants that we talked before, they tried to murder President Makarios and install a military regime led by Nikos Samson. This coup had big political consequences for the island. You can see the picture of Makarios' palace, that it was burned in 1974 on 15th July. So what happened next was Makarios narrowly escaped death in the attack. He fled the presidential palace and he went to Paphos. A British helicopter took him to the sovereign base area in Akrotiri, and there he went to London. Several days later, Makarios addressed a meeting of the UN Security Council where he was accepted as the legal president of the Republic of Cyprus. So internationally, this coup and the military takeover was not recognized. Makarios was still the president. In the meantime, what happened in Cyprus was, through this coup d'etat, through this military takeover, the EOKA fanatic, somebody called Nikos Samson, was declared temporary president of this new government. It was obvious to Ankara that Athens was behind the coup and Turkish armed forces went on alert. This happened also in 1964 and 67, that Turkish forces were on alert, but it did not grow into a big incident, into a serious reaction. But this time it was different because the Greece immediately interfered in Cyprus issue, so things were a bit tense. What happened next was Turkish Prime Minister, who was Bülent Ecevit, he flew to London to obtain British help in Cyprus, as it was in 1959 Treaty of Guarantee that there were 3 guarantor powers, Turkey, Greece and Great Britain. But this time British declined to take action as a guarantor power, and when Turkey demanded removal of Nikos Samson and the Greek officers from the National Guard, a necessary guarantee of Cypriot independence. But when Britain did not do anything, Turkey had to act by itself. From this picture you can see Nikos Samson with a military guard when his speech after the takeover. As a result, Turkish ships were already at sea. The Greek officers from Greece still did nothing, so the Turkish intervention began early on 20th July 1974. So after 15th July, in 5 days, Turkey intervened to Cyprus. After the Turkish intervention, 3 days later, the Greek junta collapsed in Greece, in Athens, and Nikos Samson resigned in Nicosia. The threat of war between 2 NATO countries, which was Turkey and Greece, was over, but the Turkish army was in Cyprus this time. In Greece, Konstantinos Karamanlis, who was in exile in France since 1963, came back to the Greek government in Greece. Kyriakos took office as the acting president of Republic of Cyprus, and the foreign ministers of the guarantor powers met in Geneva on 25th of July to discuss the military situation on the island. So you should know that Makarios is still the president. He is, at this time, he is in England, and in Cyprus, somebody called Glafkos Kleridis is the acting president. He is the representative. Prime Minister of Turkey Ecevit publicly welcomed the change of government in Greece and seemed genuinely interested in eliminating the tensions that had brought the two countries so close to war. Truce was arranged, but Turkish forces continued to take territory, to improve their positions, and to build up their supplies of war material. So what happened was, moving towards August from July, a second conference in Geneva began on 10th of August with Klerides and Denktash as the Cypriot representatives. Denktash proposed a bizonal federation with Turkish Cypriots controlling 34% of the island. However, this proposal was rejected by the Greek Cypriots. Turkish Foreign Minister proposed a Turkish Cypriot zone in the northern part of the island and 5 Turkish Cypriot enclaves elsewhere, all of which would amount once again to 34% of the island's area. Klerides asked for a break for 36 to 48 hours, so nearly 2 days, to consult with the government in Nicosia and with Makarios in London. His request was refused. And coming to 14th of August, we have the second intervention of Turkey in Cyprus. So we call this as the second phase of the Turkish intervention. 2 days later, a ceasefire was in order by the Turks after having seized 37% of the island, which is today the exact amount of the Turkish Cypriot controlled area in Cyprus. 37% of the island is controlled by Turkish Cypriots. From the picture you can see in 1974 Turkish paratroopers landing in Cyprus. This is a Time magazine of the day, dated 29th of July 1974. It shows the flag of Greece and the flag of Turkey, and it says Battle over Cyprus. So what happened is Green Line was drawn, which is the line that ran from Morphy Bay to the northwest to Famagusta in the east. This is the boundary, the actual boundary separating Greeks and Turkish parts of Cyprus still today. This was a de facto partition of Cyprus and resulted from the Turkish military action. This, you should know this, that there are 2 or 3 types of words that is used in the context. This action is called as intervention by the Turkish people and invasion occupation by the Greek people. The partition caused much suffering in addition to the thousands of dead, many of whom could not be found for even years later. An estimated 1/3 of the population of each community had to flee their homes. The island's economy was devastated. Both sides started from the beginning to their economic situation. Massive Turkish reinforcements continued to arrive. More Greek Cypriot villages were occupied and their inhabitants were driven out, or it was claimed, taken to Turkey as prisoners. But we call these people as missings of Cyprus, missing people in Cyprus, which is another subject, another chapter in our course. 36.5% of the land, which we know as 37%, came under Turkish occupation. It transformed the situation from an argument to a bigger conflict. So the consequences of 1974 was very heavy on both sides. The effect of the Greek Cypriot population of what had happened was traumatic. Out of a total community of 500,000, some 800,000 were refugees. The Greek Cypriots left their homes instantly and escaped when they heard Turks approaching. As for the human cost of the 2 operations in 1974, we have got the figure of 1,619, which is the amount of the missing persons in Cyprus, which are listed. Half of them of these people were unarmed civilians. Turkish Cypriots claimed that some of these were in probability killed in violence done by Greeks to Greeks at the time of the coup against Makarios. The Turkish Cypriots remember the deadly incidents by armed Greek Cypriots on Turkish Cypriot villagers beginning of the August of 1974. For example, in the mixed villages of Tochni, where all the Turkish villagers of any age could be found were shot. They were taken together, especially men of the village, and they were taken and shot there, and the remains were found later on. Other mass killings took place against Turkish Cypriots in Alloa, Sandalaris and Marasa. You see here the Greek Cypriot refugees heading to south under those control of the British police. You see the British flag as well. As you can see, they couldn't take much of the belongings, so they left most of their belongings there in their houses, in their old houses, and they went to be settled in refugee camps. Efforts were undertaken immediately. Intensive government, economic planning and intervention on both sides of the island soon improved living standards and allowed the construction of housing for these refugees. Both communities soon developed political systems on the European model, with parties representing mainstream political opinion from right to the left. The Turkish Cypriots wanted to build a new state. In 1975, the Turkish Federated State of Cyprus was proclaimed. In 1983, by means of a unilateral declaration of independence, Turkish Cypriots created the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, also known as TRNC. You should know here, the word unilateral is very important. It means unilateral means declared only by one side. So only Turkish Cypriots accepted this declaration of Northern Cyprus, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. By the early 1990s, only Turkey had recognized it as a nation. Rauf Denktaş, who had been political leader of the Turkish Cypriot community since 1970s, was elected as the president of this new republic, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. So, after the division, immediately negotiations started in the mid-1970s to end this de facto partition existing in actuality and to bring the two communities together again. Two major changes on the part of the Republic of Cyprus occurred in the second half of the 1970s. In 1977, 4 guidelines for the future of intercommunal talks were accepted by both communities. Their thrust was that Cyprus would become a bi-communal federal republic, a departure from the terms of the Constitution of 1960. Secondly, 10-point agreement was accepted in 1979. This achieved at a meeting between Gyprianou and Denktaş, two leaders of both sides. They worked out policies to ease further intercommunal talks. However, both of these agreements and guidelines, we can say they failed. A possible settlement was missed in 1985 when Gyprianou refused to sign a recently worked out accord. Differences in the two communities' views of the desirable mixture of federation or confederation and the powers of a central government seemed unbridgeable. It was not possible. This achievement raised hopes among Cyprus's foreign friends, and the settlement could be reached. However, these hopes stopped when Makarios, the central figure in the Greek Cypriot community, died of a heart attack in August of 1977. As I said, Gyprianou succeeded Makarios, became the next president. From this stamp, this is a postal stamp, you can see how the Cyprus conflict was depicted in the stamp. It says 10 years from the Turkish occupation in Cyprus. This is a Greek Cypriot stamp published, printed in 1984. So I have got an article. I would like to talk about Varosha, which is an abandoned tourist resort. It was closed in 1974. You can check the website. It's a BBC link from the news magazine. It talks about Varosha, the abandoned tourist resort. It says, "Welcome to Varosha, the Mediterranean's best-kept secret. Miles of sand where it's just you and nature. Dozens of grand hotels where you'll have to pick the rooms. Just remember to pack your bolt cutters to make a hole in the fence and watch out for the army patrols with orders to shoot on sight. Before the division of Cyprus in resort in Famagusta, it was a very famous family tourist destination. Some of the best beaches on the island was there. It says Richard Burton, Bridget Bardot all dropped by. Elizabeth Taylor was also present there. So it says anyone who comes from Varosha has a romanticized notion of it, says a lady called Vasia Markides. She's an American Greek Cypriot whose mother grew up in Varosha. They talk about it being the hub of art and intellectual activity. They describe it as the French Riviera of Cyprus. This was Varosha before 1974, okay? After the division, the place, all of the resorts were closed altogether and sealed off. 40 years ago, after the use of ethnic violence culminating in a coup inspired by Greece's ruling military junta, Turkey invaded Cyprus and occupied the northern third of the island. As its troops approached Varosha, a Greek Cypriot community, the inhabitants fled, intending to return when the situation calmed down. However, the resort was fenced off by Turkish military and has been a ghost town ever since. A UN resolution of 1984 calls for the handover of Varosha to UN control and prohibits any attempt to resettle it by anyone other than those who were forced out. That's why Varosha has been closed and no settlement was there since 1974. I have another article on Varosha. You can check it out. It shows view of Cyprus. It shows Varosha as a ghost town. And there is another documentary that is very good to watch. It gives you an idea. It is called Hidden in the Sand by a director, American Greek Cypriot director, Vasia Markides. You can check the link here. It's a Vimeo link. This documentary is about 1974, about memories of one family, one Greek Cypriot family. She talks about the coup, she talks about Turkish intervention, she talks about her family, she talks about the city of Famagusta, Varosha, which is inside Famagusta, how it was such a nice city, and now it is under the control of Turkish military, it is closed, and it is a bargaining thing in the negotiations with the Cyprus government. So nobody lives there over the last years, over the last 40 years, nobody was located there. And the lady Vasia Markides becomes both a director and becomes a participant of the film as well. And she talks about her family relations with the city. She examines the memories of her mother. And it's an interesting idea she gives, so it's important to watch this documentary. Okay, thank you very much. Next time we will see what happened after 1974. Thank you very much.